Essential oils. They're all the rage these days.
More and more people are bypassing the pharmacy in favor of something else, essential oils made from plants.
Yeah, but many are now swearing by the therapeutic health benefits from these plant-based oils. After trying a natural home remedy, one, by the way, that is surging in popularity lately.
The truth is that oil has hundreds of compounds in it. And so if somebody asks you, what will that oil do? You can give them a quantum physics answer and say, what do you want it to do? Because it's just a packet of possibilities. Why are oils seemingly becoming more popular in today's time? And I've noticed a great increase in the interest in oils just in the last 15 years that I've been acquainted with them. A couple of reasons for that. People are discovering that the pharmaceuticals are not working. Instead of making them well, they often make you more sick. You end up overcoming this problem and acquiring a side effect which is maybe worse than your problem. They're beginning to wake up to the fact that pharmaceuticals and medical practice in general is designed for relieving symptoms, not getting to the root cause of a disease. So you just simply get rid of one set of symptoms and you have another because you really didn't address the problem. And so they find out that essential oils actually address the roots. Most of the diseases that we have emotional and spiritual roots. They're not physical. And if you treat only the physical side of things and you still retain the emotional unresolved problems, then you may resolve one illness and just get another. We have 5 senses. 4 of those senses process through the cerebrum up here, which is your conscious, rational mind. But the nose does not. The nose circumvents this part of the brain, goes under that into an area called the limbic brain. It's the emotional brain, it's not rational. And fragrance goes straight to that part of the brain. But that is the part of the brain that is the librarian and cataloger of all of our unresolved emotions. So if you have a traumatic experience as a child or any time in your life that you don't have the maturity and understanding to process, then that emotion is stored in your body. Those experiences have to be resolved. If we can't resolve them at the time, then the limbic brain says, okay, we're going to save that for later, and it'll put it somewhere in your body. Let's say that puts it in your pancreas. Let's say that's a good place. We can put that particular experience there. 10 years later, you don't even remember it. It'll start malfunctioning as a pancreatic malfunction. Now, the medical people are going to say that's just a physical problem, and they will treat the physical idea, but that doesn't deal with the root. And let's say you don't get it, and after a little bit of hypoglycemia or some problems in that regard, that's your pancreas trying to tell you there's an issue, it's here. If you will work and call it up and deal with it, it'll go away. But you don't get it, and you're not taught that in normal health classes or books on medicine.
So when you use the word allergy, it's really funny. And the reason is that when you use the word allergy, it's to a protein. There aren't any proteins in an essential oil. It's a volatile compound extract. And so there are no true allergies to essential oils. What you can have is a chemical sensitivity. And there are a few things to think about here. The first off is that when somebody has a chemical sensitivity, it can be a genuine sensitivity, some kind of molecule that they might be highly sensitive to. The other thing to think about is that no one really goes from 0 to 60. People are usually driving at 59. The needle doesn't break the camel's back. It's every preceding needle that leads up to that one needle being too much. So the thing to keep in mind here is that there aren't allergies to essential oils. There are no proteins in the compounds that are being extracted from the plants. So when I have patients come in and they talk about allergies that they might have to fragrance, I also have a perfume company, and so I hear this commonly as well. People have allergies to fragrance. And so when I treat patients, what they're usually getting is some kind of heat or skin rash. Again, it's a chemical sensitivity that they're getting. And because no one goes from 0 to 60, people are driving usually at 59 when they touch something, and that's what pushes them over. I would advise patients, or the people that I run into, to get treated. Go see some acupuncture. Of course, it's not the only modality that you have to go to, but I have a lot of great success in treating patients, and I find that people no longer react to the things that they were reacting to.
Well, the oils go straight to the limbic brain. You can bring that forgotten memory back to consciousness, and then you can deal with it because it's back in the conscious mind. That's one of the wonderful and unique ways that oils can bring about healing that pharmaceuticals can't do, because they're designed to mask up symptoms so that you think you're well when you're really not.
I went back to the research and the science and said, so what else do these oils do on my brain? And I found a bunch of research showing that essential oils will change the brain waves. We can change the way your brain waves work. For example, you go to a spa. What kind of scent are you likely to smell when you go to a spa for a massage? It's typically lavender. So why would a spa put up lavender in the air? Well, because they don't want you to be on 6 blackberries or 7 blackberries on your iPad while the massage therapist tries to massage you, and you're supposed to be relaxed. Lavender will slow down your brain waves and will put you almost in the first stages of sleep. So lavender is an excellent oil to put in your bedroom. You're going to slow down your brain waves. We're looking at 4 main brain waves. We're looking at what we call beta. Beta waves are when you're really active. So right now I'm in beta. Then you can go down to alpha. Alpha is when I close my eyes right now and I start concentrating, I'm still awake. This is a stage where I become very creative. A lot of artists, they will paint, they will write. Let's say you have a basketball player and he wants to shoot a basket and there's all that noise around him. Something that distinguishes a very good basketball player is that you can measure that he can have a burst of alpha waves. That means he can completely concentrate on the basket and zoom out all that noise. And that will distinguish a very good basketball player from maybe not as good a basketball player. So we can do this with oils. We know, for example, that sandalwood, the frankincense, the peppermints, there will be more the alpha and the beta. However, when you go into the lavender, the bergamot, the cedar woods, they will slow you down. You go to beta, for alpha, and then you go to theta and delta. These are all the waves that we have in the brain. These are the waves that you use while you sleep. Knowing all that, I can use essential oils to treat people with insomnia, or to help them just fall asleep, or babies that cried. So it's just fascinating, again, how you see the science and then the effect it has on the patients.
Yes, hello everybody. This is Doc Ollie, and here's Becky. Becky, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
I am Becky Basham, neurofeedback practitioner and brain fitness coach.
Okay, so what Becky does is basically brain mapping, real-time brain mapping. We're going to provide you with live images on that screen that you see. You're going to see exactly what happens with my brain. I have a brain cap on. We're going to measure all my brain waves, and we're going to see into the brain, and we're going to smell some essential oils.
Each one of those squares on the picture represents a 5 millimeter voxel of electrical information. Those are your brain waves.
Yeah.
They're measured in cycles per second, or how many times they go up and down in a second. And the computer takes all this information, breaks it down into component bands, different frequencies, and tells us how much of each different speed. We've got different speeds of brainwaves. Delta is slower. Theta is a little bit slow, as in 0 to 4 cycles per second, or hertz. And we've got theta, alpha, beta. And this is the front part of your brain here. This is the top of the head. And then if we turn here, this is the back. Each one of these green dots represents one of the electrodes on your head. Theta is often, that's the brainwave that's associated with meditation.
That's right.
Alpha is a nice idle frequency, and once you, like you said, with athletes.
What we're going to do now, we're going to, as soon as you're ready, you're going to tell me. And then I'm going to tell you what oil I'm sniffing, and then we're going to see what happens to the brain overall. And we're going to dig into different parts of the brain, like the limbic system, the frontal lobe, the back lobe, the occipital lobe, temporal lobes, and going to see what the oils do to these parts of the brain.
Now, what oil are you going to start with?
So the first one I'm going to use is peppermint.
If I'm going to use peppermint oil, I would use it to help me to focus and concentrate, right?
That's right.
So, and when do we normally need to focus and concentrate is when we're going too slow, like brain fog. So let me take this and window it to that theta. Now this here in the frontal lobe is the part of the brain that's in charge of focus and attention.
I'm smelling peppermint now.
So you've got, oh, now this is really interesting, Dr. Ollie. The left side of the brain typically is associated with positive emotions, and the right side of the brain with negative emotions. The left side of the brain is analytical, the right side of the brain is big picture,
And which one are we
thinking.
activating here?
So the left side of your brain is looking like it has more beta than the right side of the brain.
Which means I'm positive.
Positive
at this point. So
and
peppermint makes me active, analytical, and positive.
interesting.
That's very interesting. So again, I'm going to say this very loud. Peppermint has made me positive and activated my focus and my analytical thinking. Now I'm going to switch the oil, and let's just stay on this one because we don't want to mess around too much around with the different frequency. Let's go back to the whole brain, and I'm going to grab an oil, lavender. So right now I'm taking lavender. I'm going to start breathing on the lavender.
Now, lavender is typically associated with a calming effect, isn't it, Dr. Ollie?
Correct. That is correct.
So let's see if our theory holds, then the level of beta activity will decrease when you use the lavender. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I think that's exactly what we see, right?
It appears that way. It's becoming less red.
So my frontal brain becomes slower.
Now let's look at this let's see what it does with the limbic lobes. Limbic lobes are usually associated with emotions, memories. See that red spot in the front there? That part of the brain is known as the anterior cingulate gyrus. This part here would be the left posterior cingulate gyrus.
Okay.
And these are places of the limbic lobes that are in charge of where the brain is going to focus attention. The anterior cingulate, as Dr. Daniel Amen would describe, he says, is like the gear shifter of the brain. Determines what part of the brain.
This time I take a lemon and just stay on that measurement.
Okay.
And I'm going to see if lemon can activate the limbic system.
So these are your temporal lobes.
So I'm still doing lemon, and we're looking at temporal lobes.
Let's see what you can do to activate your temporal lobes, Dr. Ollie.
Oh, and we see that already. Looks like with lemon, I'm activating my ability to listen. I'm going to make something interesting. I'm going to mix lemon and peppermint, two activating oils.
Look at that. It's mainly on the left side, too.
Interesting, but we see clearly an increase in activity while I'm sniffing on lemon and peppermint. So let's finish that up. I'm taking away the peppermint and the lemon right now, and we're going to go and do something else. I'm going to open frankincense. We're going to see what frankincense does to my brain. Now let's see what I would expect with frankincense. With frankincense, I would expect a relaxation of the brain, and I would expect possibly an activation on the limbic system. It will slow down my limbic system. So I'm starting sniffing frankincense right now.
And typically this is a problem when people maybe in the classroom or on the job just paying attention to too many things and they're all over the place.
So temporal lobes.
Look at that.
And the other side that was very red before is now calmed down.
Yeah, it was actually a little bit too red. Now, granted, when you started smelling that, your brain was in a nice attention, good place. So it's very important, I would think, to be careful about which oils you choose. They are powerful, and you want to make sure that you select the one that's going to be best for you at the moment.
So clearly frankincense has slowed down my left temporal lobe. Let's go into the limbic system at this point.
Okay.
And at this point, I would suggest we go to a lower brainwave because I think the frankincense is supposed to slow down, especially receptors in the limbic system.
We'll look at alpha.
So alpha seems to be very slow also in the limbic system right now.
Actually, alpha, right now, the alpha is in a good place.
Oh,
it's
in a good
green.
place. Because,
It's in a good place, okay?
Yeah.
If you don't have enough alpha, it's going to be on the blue side. If you have too much going, then it's going to be on the red side.
Which tells me that frankincense brings me in a very good creative stage right now. It's very nice.
Your limbic lobes are happy.
Yeah, my limbic system is very happy with frankincense, which makes sense because we know we have receptors in the limbic system for frankincense.
Oh, interesting. If you look.
I just opened my eyes.
Okay. Close your eyes again. I'm going to describe what happens. Turn this around. So your brain is making a normal range of theta activity for somebody your age and gender. We're in a normative reference database here. But what I'm going to do here, just stay right where you are. I'm going to show everybody your raw brain waves. And what this means here, see, his eyes are closed. See these brain waves here that are bigger and more sinusoidal? They're like bigger and wider. So those ones are slower. And they're located in the posterior part of it. There's one right there. Nice alpha burst in the posterior temporal lobes. This is what we want to see when people close their eyes and they're in a nice meditative state. If people are really stressed out and hypervigilant, we're not going to see that. We're going to see those brain waves continue to go really fast.
It's always nice to see that science works together with what you think the oil would do. And it's clear for me to say that the oils do really support healthy brain function. We saw that pretty nicely, both on the speeding up side and on the calming side.
Cedarwood oil is one of the most interesting oils of the Bible. It's mentioned in there as a blend of 50% cedarwood and 50% hyssop oil. But what most interested me was it talks about taking that blend and apply it to the right upper ear, that's right here, just below that rim, to the right thumb, and to the right big toe. And here's what those points mean. They're all three emotional releasing points. This point right here, in that part of the ear where my finger is where you would release issues with your mother and father. This one is most interesting because there's where you relieve blockages against learning new material. And then the right big toe is to release bad habits and compulsive behavior. But the thumb was the one that interested me the most because I teach course in chemistry. There are many people out there who are very good in music, they're good in social studies, can learn almost anything, but they have a block on one subject like physics or math, chemistry. Why would you be good at everything but one field? Well, it's because on that particular field you have an emotional block against that subject. It's not your IQ. And we can get rid of that block and open the way for you to learn that subject. So when I teach my chemistry class, I always ask everybody raise your hand who has no problem learning other subjects but you have a problem with chemistry. Half a dozen hands go up, yeah, I never could learn it. I said, well, we're going to take care of that right now. So we take cedarwood oil and put it on the right thumb. And I said, now that needs to get to the limbic brain. Your limbic brain is right over the roof of your mouth and below the cerebrum, so let's take your thumb, put it in your mouth, suck on your thumb, push it up there to the roof of your mouth. So the whole class is sitting there sucking their thumbs. And before it's over with, the people that couldn't learn chemistry, they can learn it. It gets rid of that blockage. Many people that couldn't even learn chemistry that I have taught are now teachers of chemistry. And it always goes back to a traumatic experience in their childhood, usually in a classroom with a science or math teacher who intimidated the students, embarrassed them, and humiliated them in front of everybody else. You know, stand up and recite these things and they couldn't do it, or go to the board and they just stood there, couldn't do it, and they were so embarrassed that they put a block right there on that subject. So the very thing the teacher was trying to do to teach them, they were blocking.
So organizations like the FDA came out of a large problem with non-trained people or professionals, however you want to call them, selling products and claiming that they had medical value, and they may or may not have had medical value or potency or the function that they were claiming to have. So when somebody uses the term snake oil today, what they're usually trying to say, a lot of times you hear the phrase quack medicine, and they're trying to say, oh, it's quack medicine. I hear this about Chinese medicine too. And the thing is that more than half the world's population uses this as primary health care. It doesn't mean that half the world's population are idiots. It's just a different science. So when you step back 150 years and you take a look at what was happening in the United States, first off, there weren't 50 states. The United States doesn't look like it did today. People didn't have the capacity to communicate over large distances of time and space in a very quick manner. And so there was a need for the government to step in and try to regulate some of the things that were being claimed. As the railroads were being built, the Irish were being hired on the East Coast and the Chinese on the West Coast. And with the Chinese came their medicine and all of their medical practitioners, and actually snakes are used as medicinal substances. There are snake oils that are made from snake. The railroads really liked the Chinese because compared to the Irish, they were in fantastic health. The Irish didn't have the medical practitioners, the knowledge, and they weren't taking care of themselves quite as well as the Chinese were. And so the Chinese had a great work ethic and they didn't get as sick and they lasted a lot longer. Fewer than 50% of doctors would have been trained, formally trained, and actually have gone to a medical school. Most people around the world up until recently, until after World War II, would have been trained from an apprenticeship. And so you worked in a doctor's office and that's how you learn the medicine. You have another definition of a snake oil in that as people were out west, people got bit by snakes. I lived out in California for 5 years and there's a whole bunch of poisonous snakes that just wander up into your house sometimes or onto your back porch. And so if you lived out west before there were people, I can imagine that there might have been some run-ins with snakes, and a lot of them are poisonous. And so you had lots of antidotes and things like that that were people making for snake bites. And they may or may not have been effective, and again, that needs to be regulated for those snake oils. Something that people don't talk about is there's actually an herb that comes out of Canada and northeastern United States, and in its common name it's called snake root. And snake root is also extracted as an essential oil, and it's a species of wild ginger. And they're actually, again, pharmacy tradition, using essential oils as medicine and tinctures and other types of extracts. A lot of these extracts would have been fragrant, you know, again, going back into volatile compounds, essential oils. But the snake root oil, again, snake root being the common name, was used in a wide variety of pharmacy compounding, you know, things that people were buying.
The primary purpose of the FDA in general is public health and safety. So that's the first thing they're looking for in any product they regulate is it safe for consumer use?
For the FDA to approve things, they need to have scientific proof. So in order to get scientific proof, we need to do studies. In order to do large studies, we need money. It will cost a lot of money. Who is paying normally the money to do large studies? It's the pharmaceutical industry, because they want to make money with their new drugs. They hope to find a new blockbuster, you know, for $1 billion sales a year, like the statins are. So they will invest a lot of money in drug development, but they will probably not invest anything in essential oil because there's really no patents you can fill on that. So there's really no sales for them to do with these kind of drugs.
It's really simple. It really goes back to money. You know, when you look at the FDA and pharmaceutical companies, so many of those people are really tied together. And really, the fact is it really comes down to money, and that's really the only reason.
Although more and more pharmaceutical companies start going into the supplement market because it's an enormous market. I mean, when you look at about 60 to 80% of the population is taking one or more supplements, right? So it's a tricky question. The FDA is charged to keep the public safe. For the last 15 years, I was heavily involved in drug development. What we do, we ask someone to bring back a plant from the jungle, flowers, trees, any plant. And then we give this to the chemists and we say, look, can you analyze this plant for me? But at the end of the day, you get a readout of the components that you find in the plants. You don't always know what these components are, but you see curves with a whole bunch of different peaks, and then suddenly you see a huge peak and then again small peaks. And we came kind of to the conclusion, probably wrongly so, that if you see a huge peak of something in a plant, that's an active substance. Now that's sometimes a very dangerous assumption, because sometimes these little small peaks are as important or more important. So you're getting a readout, and then you tell the chemist, look, I see a big peak, why don't you go back in the laboratory and recreate that synthetically for me? So the next day he goes in the laboratory, starts cooking, and comes back with a substance. Then you look at that and say, well, pretty cool. So now you start doing cell line studies. You put, let's say in cancer research, we take very well-known cancer cells, and we mix them together with these substances that we just synthesized. And then we see whether it inhibits cancer growth or not. If it does, then we move on to what we call in vivo studies, where we take some animals with well-known cancer models, and then we look at, is it able to basically save that animal or not, or decrease the tumor growth. And then we can move into a human trial. So what we just created is a drug that is made out of a huge peak, only one substance, whereas in the plant that we gave in the first place to analyze, we had maybe up to 2,000. Maybe only 500, maybe 3,000 compounds. So we took one out of it, we now synthesize it so we can give an enormous dose of it, and it will just do one thing typically, because it's one compound. They will have side effects. Why? Because you're giving an unnaturally high dose of a single thing to a patient that is not natural. Whereas if I could go back to the plant where we started in the first place, I would have something that is very well balanced, and I could give that to the patient. The same substance is in there, but it's natural. And because we have 2,000 compounds in it, or more, we're going to see multiple effects. We're going to not only treat symptoms, we may even treat the cause. And that's, the light I had to go on in my head is, oh my God, this is the same thing I was doing in drug development, but it's the pure form, it's the natural form, it's the complete form. Now, what I'm saying is very, very difficult to say in a sense, because the FDA has approved the essential oils as food supplements or cosmetic supplements. And the FDA has not approved essential oils as treatment modalities, certainly not to internalize. And you and I, we are consuming essential oils on a daily basis. We just don't know it. They're in all the food flavorings. This is what essential oils are being used mostly for, food flavoring. Right? Or for cosmetics. So we know that they have a safe history of thousands of years.
The FDA is not interested in anything unless it can be classified as a drug. Drugs generally in their mind are man-made substances, they're not natural. They are really controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, and the pharmaceuticals are not interested in anything that doesn't make them a profit. And to make a profit, they need to have something that they can uniquely own and patent, like a drug that's not natural, it's man-made, and it's unique. And so a non-patentable medicine is of no interest to the pharmaceuticals, and the Food and Drug Administration is not interested either. If you have something that's supposed to be an effective drug, they want to see a toxicity study. That means that you have to get a set of lab animals, and you start giving doses of your stuff to the animal population, and you keep increasing it until half of the population dies. It's called the lethal dose that 50% of your animals die. It's called the LD50 number. Well, if you have something that's natural and it's not toxic, and you cannot find a lethal dose, they will not accept that. In their philosophy, no medicine can be effective unless it's toxic.
I do realize there's still a lot of confusion about compliance. And in general, you can say you're trying to sell a product or you're trying to sign up a new distributor. Automatically, that is called commercial speech because you're trying to do something commercially. You're trying to sell something or to make money of it in one way or the other. Commercial speech has its own rules. And there's two agencies that will look at that. The FDA would look at the health claims that you make, and then the FTC, so the FDA stands for Food and Drug Administration, and the FTC, which stands for the Federal Trade Commission, will look at on how do you use your marketing claims to try to sell something. I frequently talk about living above the line. We have a big red line. Everything above the line is wellness, fitness, healthy living, toxin-free living. It's anything you can do to support your own lifestyle, to make a healthy lifestyle. So as long as you talk about these things that are above the line, you're going to be fine. The moment you go below the line, it means you're talking about disease, about prevention, about treating, about curing. All that's a no-no. It's all about two words. It's intended use and another word called labeling, or the label. Okay? So what is intended use? Well, if I take a peppermint and say, I'm going to use the peppermint for asthma, the intended use is to use it as a medicine against asthma. That's illegal, it's a no-no. But when I say I use peppermint to support my healthy breathing, that's a different story. Now you're above the line, you wellness, fitness, and you just try to improve your life. Now, label is a little more difficult to understand. People always think the label is just what's on the bottle, right? There's always a little label that sticks to the bottle. Whatever product you buy has a label. And I always try to get people to read labels and learn how to read labels. So they always think, well, if we talk about essential oil, it's the label on the bottle of the essential oil that we're talking about. No. From the FDA and FTC point of view, the label means everything that talks about the product, mentions the products, or shows the product. Meaning your website, your Facebook page, your email even that mentions a product, whatever it is. So you have to be really, really careful what you say because it's all considered a label. So when it comes to essential oils, the essential oil company will go, in this case to the FDA because it's kind of health products, and they will say, okay, we intend to use peppermint for this. This could be aromatic use. In other words, you do aromatherapy or you smell it. It could be topical use, so you put it somewhere, or it could be internal use. We know, look, the FDA knows there's like 15,000 studies on essential oils, so they can read. I mean, so why they cannot read all these research studies that we have? Well, they can and they do. But it's not up to them to tell it because there's 10 studies on peppermint showing this, that now every company can claim that. It's up to the company to go to the FDA and say, look, we used our oil to do this study, we did multiple, and it always showed the same result. Therefore, we want you to approve it for this use. Do we want that? Do you want for every oil that you consume today to go to a physician to get a prescription, or to only be able to buy this in the pharmacy? I don't think so. So this is why the company, they stay with the Cosmetic Act or with the Dietary Act. They don't go to the over-the-counter or the Professional Prescription Medicine Act. All over the world, when you look at essential oils, with the exception of the US, in 99% of the countries, they are registered as cosmetics only. So that restricts the claims you can make around the world even more than what you can do in the US. So some people think, oh my God, the FDA is so terrible. Well, go somewhere else in the world. The FDA is way more liberal than other places around the world, interestingly.
And one thing that you don't see happening in modern Western science is once something has been shown, no one is going back and retesting the theories. And it's one of the reasons why when you see a pharmaceutical being released out into the public, 10 years later it's taken off the market. Because now what do you have? You have a real-world experiment. You have multitudes of people taking this in a variety of different situations that they exist in, and then you see, does it work the way that they think it works? Is it effective? Is it harming people? What kinds of side effect is really the wrong word. It's more like what kinds of unexpected actions does it have? Side effect sounds more negative than I think what the reality of it is. And as you look at these things, again, over a span of time, that's what real science is. Clinical science, I think, is the really effective science because you can show anything that happened in an isolated incident in a lab with a small group of people. But take it out into the world and you have thousands, millions of people using this, and there's not a control. All of their lives are different, their diets are different, their habits are different. That's when you really see how something behaves within a population. how many people over at least 2,200 years of written history, and even the oldest texts reference that this stuff is older than the writing. And on top of that, you have archaeological evidence that shows that this goes back several millennia. So there's no dispute that it's old. And I have trouble believing in a world where everything could potentially be life or death, that people would continue propagating something that doesn't work. You know, why would people do something over and over again if it doesn't actually work? And why would large masses of people over a very large geographical space over several millennia of time keep doing something if it doesn't work? I mean, I don't know how more science that gets.
Let me explain what a cell does during the day. How does the cell know what to do? We have a DNA, it's a spiral, we'll call it a helix. This DNA is part of your genetic code. This is how you look like you look, how I look like I look. That's determined in your genes. So in order for the cells to look at your genes, what happens multiple times a day or multiple times even a second, that DNA has to open up. And now you have two strands of DNA that are coming apart. And these two strands are being copied. That copy is called an RNA. That copy will go into the cell. I mean, all that happens in the cell, in the nucleus of the cell. I say one of the most important parts of the cell. And the helix goes back together. So now we have a copy out there, and that copy will tell basically in what sequence you have to bring in certain amino acids to put together, to build together some blocks. It's like building Lego. And depending on what the RNA says, it's a different sequence. Depending on the sequence of the amino acid, you get different proteins or different hormones. This is how your body knows what to do. It's all built on this whole kind of process. The big question now becomes, how does the cell know this DNA is that long? How does it know to start reading here to here, not here to here? And we call these kind of pieces that will determine where you start reading this DNA transcription factors. They will go in there and determine you're going to start reading here and stop reading here. We know that certain foods, ingredients in the foods, act as transcription factors. Essential oils, we know, act as transcription factors. So the essential oil will tell your DNA where to start reading, where to stop reading. And that will determine what kind of proteins the cell will produce.
The truth is that oil has hundreds of compounds in it. And so if somebody asks you, what will that oil do? You can give them a quantum physics answer and say, what do you want it to do? Because it's just a packet of possibilities. And it's going to manifest certain possibilities for you. It'll manifest different ones for me and different ones for somebody else. And so what decides what possibilities are manifest is your intention, the intention of the people or the person anointing you. And so out of that packet of possibilities, we make decisions on an unconscious or conscious level that pulls out of that oil certain things to happen. So we're wedded to the sciences and to the spiritual world through quantum physics. The truth is that oil has hundreds of compounds in it. And so if somebody asks you, what will that oil do? You can give them a quantum physics answer and say, what do you want it to do? Because it's just a packet of possibilities. And it's going to manifest certain possibilities for you. It'll manifest different ones for me and different ones for somebody else. And so what decides what possibilities are manifest is your intention, the intention of the people or the person anointing you. And so out of that packet of possibilities, we make decisions on an unconscious or conscious level that pulls out of that oil certain things to happen. So we're wedded to the sciences and to the spiritual world through quantum physics.